Let's open up some time for your questions. Any that you'd like to direct to the panel. I'll try and rephrase the question so we catch it on video. Way at the back. Would you mind standing and speak loudly? Thank you.
So my question is for Joe and Kurt. So one of the comments was made, investors like to see that you can have reoccurring revenue. With a game studio where you're trying to just get one started, you have one game, you have one idea. How did you pitch it that you will have reoccurring revenue off one game?
So that's an interesting question, and if I can rephrase it and clarify it to Joe and Kurt, it really is how do I demonstrate with one product I have reoccurring revenue? Let me have you address the idea of multiple products in your plan. When's the right time to bring in version number 2? And can you get reoccurring revenue with one product? Joe?
Yeah, there's different ways to look at it. The approach that I took was addressing it on how scalable is this product. When you think about games, a lot of the olden times it was you build it, put it on a cartridge, ship it out, and then you come back and do the second version if it was a big hit. With Dub Wars, I thought, okay, what is it that's unique about the approach that we're taking that if it really does take off, how do we continue to go from there? We license all of our music. And so it's not, one of our local guys just making a track and hoping that we're going to make a fun game and have music recognition and everything from there, and marketing and everything else. It was, okay, let's find the best artists that we can get access to, and let's get them involved in the marketing. Let's get them involved in being excited about our game. And so with us, we started out with 10 songs. We licensed those. We built custom levels to that. And then as we move forward, we're going to continue to license more music, hopefully from more well-known artists and things like that. One thing that we learned the hard way is nobody cares about a song that was made 3.5 years ago. So, the new strategy that we're looking at going forward is to work with artists early on, take tracks that are not released, and do a co-marketing effort there. So, as far as reoccurring revenue, other things to keep in mind are how, how sticky is your game? Is it something like Clash of Clans or Clash Royale that people can get involved in, and you can just add additional, basically DLC, right? And so it's not. The other thing that I think that is working well is a lot of these games, especially on the mobile side, are focusing on really small MVPs. So MVP is your minimum viable product. If you can get something out there that's just very basic, really fun, and you can show not so much revenue early on, but traction with users, that's another approach that you can take. And then, as long as you have a way to monetize that and you can continue to add, that's a good way to go too.
Thank you, Joe. Kurt, if you speak to that, do investors get nervous with one product companies? And how quickly do you want to see multiple products come in terms of games?
Certainly one product companies are common. In fact, there's a general desire, I think, on the part of investors to see evidence that a management team is super focused on making something successful rather than trying to make 10 things successful. On the other hand, one of the challenges, I think, if to the extent we're talking about just gaming specifically here, one of the challenges is that you do see, you have seen in the market a number of crazy successful game properties that became crazy unsuccessful rather quickly, right? Really, really high peaks and then fairly, unfortunately, disastrous drop-offs. And so it can be, I think maybe this is what you're speaking to, Craig, is that a portfolio certainly takes some of that risk away of the one-hit wonder factor. There are companies that do recurring revenue models in gaming, that it's a subscription-based game as opposed to in-app purchases or other ways that you can monetize. And so it has been done, and there are super durable properties, some of which you've mentioned. They do seem to be devilishly hard to create, and that is one of the reasons why traditional venture capital funding in this particular space can be hard to come by, because a lot of funds, including ours, have invested in game-related companies that had short spurts of success, but then couldn't hold on to it.
Other questions? Please, right here.
Do you offer funds to solopreneurs or groups more often?
So the question, and are you directing it to?
Because some of the processes could be automated, Just wondering if you take into account that if it can be automated, working as a solopreneur and keeping things lean is something that you would consider favorable, or does it have to have a team of
So the question is, would investors place funds in a solo entrepreneur run business? Okay. And do you want to direct that to anyone in particular?
probably Kurt?
Okay. We have done so. Typically, we're trying to see two skill sets definitely met in a founding team. One is the ability to build a product, and the second is the ability to sell the product. Other things can often be outsourced. And so it's not uncommon for us to fund two-person founding teams. It's actually quite common for us to fund two-person founding teams. Sometimes that skill set can be combined into a single individual. Usually that won't exist for very long. I can't think of more than maybe one or two companies out of the 85 that we have in our portfolio that started and got funding from us as an individual, as opposed to a couple of people that definitely between the two of them had those two skill sets.
You raise an interesting point because especially with creative people, and the room is full of creatives, it's so much easier to be creative on your own. And it's always risky to get someone else involved. There are some, John, I'm going to ask you to respond to this because I think Techstars is looking for a 3-member team, maybe even more. What's been your experience in that? What skill sets do they want in the team to consider?
So my experience has been similar to what Kurt mentioned, and it's sort of the hacker hustler mentality. You have someone that can build and someone that can sell. And I think my particular expertise is more of in the designer side of things. And I think bringing in that designer component, if you can have it in a founding team, can be extremely valuable because there's an elegance in user experience and user interface design, which is specifically what I do because we have a web-based product. And being able to bring a certain level of quality to the founding team can really help. As Kurt mentioned, though, it is also something that can be outsourced if you're at that point where you need to bootstrap and you just have to. So
we've often looked at the candidates that we're considering to be involved with as the first people they can need to convince are their other team members. So if you're an entrepreneur leader, if you can convince some other creatives, good people to rally around you, that's a good sign, actually, that you've got a team. You can rally a team. And that becomes actually a precursor to investment.
Craig, real quick on teams. I've even seen successful pitch events with venturecapital.org or Wayne Brown Institute, as they used to be, and other places, where it may be a solopreneur, but they may have a very robust board of advisors. And so they're getting some expertise in finance and marketing and coding and design from some other sources. And that's always impressive if it can round out the team more, because I know we're all rock stars, but to have that additional support is comforting to someone who's going to put some money into it.
Thank you, Mike. Good question right here.
Yeah, so my question is, getting in the venture community takes getting usually a connection to somebody else, right? And since the community here doesn't fund, we talk about Clash Royale and Clash of Clans, those aren't small projects, right? They're $100 million build. That's not something that two people can really do. And so where would you, I guess, Kurt, recommend looking for funds to do movies or bigger games that can be competitive in that industry? I mean, even Candy Crush is not a small game,
So let's make sure we understand the question. The question is being able to acquire or access large amounts of funding
for these projects that
require a lot of, okay. I'm going to have Kurt and Beth, would you mind talking about this as well? Because Beth is involved with the 10,000 startups, or 10,000 Goldman Sachs, which I think is reaching to some bigger ones. How do you ramp up investment? Can you, from a seed investment, get to a $100 million investment, and how do you get there?
It's a challenge. I mean, you've got to have a lot to prove to an investor to get that kind of an audience. But in talking to some of the angels who have clearly admitted, that's not their area of focus and expertise here locally, there are, pockets that do specifically invest in larger companies. You're going to have to go to LA or Silicon Valley or Boston or even Austin. I think Mike mentioned a couple large venture firms that invest specifically in those kinds of ventures, but you're probably not going to find them here. What you will find here, though, I think, are people who can connect you to those larger entities. But you've really got to know the ecosystem first before you're going out and chasing. I would say probably start small and see what you can find to sort of build upon that capital investment, and then go after some of the bigger venture houses out in Silicon Valley or Los Angeles.
And I like Mike's approach, Kurt, as you're preparing, which is get some wins here, get some endorsements locally, leverage that to a bigger market, which really does happen.
Yeah, and I would say that probably the most helpful endorsements you could get in that regard would be a local angel investor that has a connection to the industry. Fortunately, I think Park City was probably the place where this momentum really started in Utah, where you had a number of people from outside of the state who had experience in publishing or a number of different industries, built their careers outside of the state, decided to build a second home here or retire here, became active in Park City Angel Network, and now they're interested in projects that are in the industry they're familiar with. So with that connection, it may only be a $25,000 check from them, but they know the people that you need to talk to get the big check. So that's probably where I would recommend that you start. And there are a number of ways to get access to those kinds of networks. Panda Labs, Park City Angel Network, Ted McAleer, there are a bunch of people. Utah is a very open, welcoming ecosystem. So a little bit of legwork on your part, and you'll find those people.
John Buehler, do you want to speak to Park City at that point as well? Because you understand that environment and what Kurt's referring to, the connections of people there to outside markets.
Well, Kurt said the place to start would be Pando and Ted McAleer. And I office in there as well. I see Ted almost daily. I see a lot of the angels. We have a monthly meeting with some of the stakeholders in Park City, include angels, economic development people, city and county council. We just kind of talk about stuff. But that would be the best place to start. And, you can talk to me afterwards, or pandalabs.org. And Ted actually is a very open guy. He loves us. And you got to remember, the angels want you guys. They don't make any money unless you guys can come up with some ideas. So they're wanting to reach out. They're wanting to talk, and they'll give you a lot of time. So.
Craig, can I just throw one thing in there too? In my experience, if you listen to Joe's story and my story, we've been at this for years. This is not something that just turned around and boom, overnight success. My CEO right now has meetings all day, every day lined up. He's working and he's going and doing meetings, and he's working and doing meetings. And he's not always meeting with people who are writing checks. He's writing with people that could write checks. And he's developing a cadence with that audience and trying to show, this is who I am. This is what I said I was going to do. And I'm going to show you over this long period of time that I'm doing those things. And when I think I know what's going to happen and that doesn't happen, here's how I pivoted, and here's what I learned, and this is what we ended up doing instead, and this is why that's successful. And my experience has been both in companies I've been a part of and in those that I've just seen from the outside, that those are the most successful entrepreneurs, the ones that leverage, like John said, people will take a lunch from you, a free lunch from you. Go meet with as many people as possible. Try to develop that cadence and keep it up with the people who matter to you in your industry and the business that you're trying to do.
Thank you, John.
As someone who's worked in the AAA gaming industry, I'd like to better understand how the investment community understands our industry, and specifically the free-to-play business model, and how much of our time spent in the pitch should we spend educating those terms. And as an example, if I were to say things like DAU, ARPS, and ARPU, do you understand and relate to what I'm saying in terms of how that relates to successful revenue, or is that something we can spend time helping to bring the audience up to our level of understanding?
I think that's a great question, which is what's your assumption going into a pitch to investors? How familiar are they with this industry in general? You've given some very specific terms. I think the premium freemium model also as well. Kurt, I can't think. You're on the spot on this one, so you're going to have to respond. How knowledgeable in general do you think your peers are towards this industry?
Shockingly enough, I know what all those terms mean. There actually, there have been enough companies in your space and related spaces that have started in Utah and that have gone through kind of all the local investors and pitches and that sort of stuff that most people get it at a basic level. It doesn't mean they are necessarily experts that could provide incredibly valuable advice to your company going forward. But don't assume that there's a ton of education you have to do because you probably don't at a basic level.
Joe, do you want to speak to that too? And have you found something, developing a strategic partner is not a pitch event. That's a relationship building experience. So how have you acquainted people with your product and especially the nuances of the market?
If you're looking for strategic partnerships, the one thing that you need to do is show up to as many gaming expos as you can. So I've been to E3 multiple years, and at the Tokyo Game Show. That was how I got the attention of some of these platform holders. They're like, wow, I recognize you. Okay, as a familiar face. You just show up and you go and you talk to all these guys in their booths, and you get their business cards, you follow up with them. That's, it's taken me years, but I've never gone to an expo and come away and said, oh, that was a waste of time. Because you see the same people there, and they're excited to see you. And as long as you're able to show them, hey, this is the progress that I've made since the last expo, then, they really start to actually look forward to your interactions.
Good. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, so I do have a small, so on the project that I'm working on, we've done some smart scaling down so that we, the funding that we are looking at is in that kind of sort of investment pocket change where it would just be a few thousand to finish it out. My question is that to what type of organizations and markets with those type of investors who are looking for smaller type of investments?
So let me see if I've got the question. Is it really almost how low can you go? How small of an investment can I ask for from an outside investor? Okay. And I think that's an interesting one. Mike, you want to speak to that? And I want someone on the panel to come back to crowdfunding and Kickstarter campaigns, because I think that is a source of low cost.
I kind of have my little list of 10 ways to finance a startup, and of course, family and friends, one of them's crowdfunding that others can address. Credit cards, believe it or not, are a way to help float your cash, and you all know that. And of course, Zions has great business credit cards. SBA loans are when you're further along, but a good one that people overlook is microloans. And the Utah Micro Enterprise Loan Fund is one of the best out there. And they give loans between $500 and $35,000. And they're looking for, they've funded such a variety of things. Everything from the Peruvian immigrant that says, well, if I just had a bigger frying pan, I could make more of these tortillas, and you go into that committee, and all the banks in town kick in to help fund that, including Zions. And so that's an introduction we can make for you. There's local government revolving loan funds. Salt Lake County has one, Mountainland governments down south. Sometimes those are good if you have kind of we'll be able to get some more funding at point A several months down the road, but we just need a little bit to bridge that until then. Those revolving loan funds are helpful. There's other ways to think about money, including factoring. We do this at Zions. If you have a customer that you might have been in business 5 days, but your customer's been in business 50 years or 5 years, then we can get you money based on the accounts receivables. If there's some sort of recurring thing to a customer, that may be tougher in this industry. Equipment leasing, some of you are not only on the software side, but if you're manufacturing anything or you need 3D printers, there's things we can do that way to stretch your cash. And of course, angel and venture funding. But there are some ways, including the Utah Micro Enterprise Loan Fund, where you can even get a $500 loan. One other thing is at a bank, sometimes people think they need an SBA loan, and what they really need is more of a line of credit. And so there's some things we can do like that, especially for a smaller amount for a newer entrepreneur.
Great suggestions. And it really underscores the need at a very early stage to have a banking relationship. Sometimes we think, that's too small for that. No, start early. How many here have actually tried a Kickstarter campaign for something creative? A couple. John and Joe, quickly. Good idea, bad idea. Is it worth the time and effort?
We kind of jumped into it when there was games that were doing $3 million, raising on the Kickstarter, and we definitely didn't put the work into it that we should have. Had I gone back and done it again, I would do it again. I think Kickstarter is a very valuable tool. One thing that I kind of use is don't use Kickstarter as a way to raise money. Use it as a way to collect money. And what I mean by that is you basically need to have your whole campaign. You need to reach out and talk to people. You need to basically do everything possible without actually launching your campaign to see if people are interested in it, see if they're actually going to fund it, get ideas from them, whether they actually want a t-shirt with the video game or if they'd rather have, extra levels or some sort of editor to get in and create in the game. So I'd say it's a valuable tool. Things to keep in mind, it could still be this way, but we raised $35,000 on our Kickstarter campaign. We had a couple big super fans that went through and they didn't fund. And so what that means is we got to the end of our goal. We were over our $30,000 goal, but credit card information was missing or bad or whatever. We collected about $10,000. And so at the end of the day, it honestly wasn't even worth it to have such a low amount of money and have, a lot of things that, we have to worry about, things like that. So.
Takes a lot of effort. John, anything you'd add to that?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. Just reiterating the fact that putting a campaign up on Kickstarter does not guarantee success, obviously. I mean, it's a very concerted effort. There's a lot of effort that goes into building awareness and driving people to Kickstarter to basically collect money. If they don't know about your game prior to that, odds are that you're probably not.
Question right back there, please.
So my question is for John Cooper. You mentioned that you help teams with in prototype phase. My question is, what do you consider a prototype? Because that's such a wide definition. And where do you need a product before you consult with them, or?
So the question is, how would you define a prototype stage on a game? And I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember how you made the connection. So,
well, my experience with prototypes and what some of these early stage investors want to see is they want to see something actually working, and then they also want to see it in a customer hand, and feedback. So, if it's a game, they want to see it. They want to see customers giving you, yeah, this is cool, I like it. What they don't want to, they don't want to see is some ideas on paper and you have a non-existing engineering team that hasn't been able to put anything together. These prototypes can be inexpensive. I've seen people dump $17,000 into a prototype in engineering time, and I've seen people dump $150,000 into a prototype. So it all depends on who your audience is.
I think that's a very good question, though, and it's really how far along do I need to bake my idea before I present it to someone, especially to get it well received by investors. Kurt raised the comment that he is looking at investments where someone's coming to them with $100,000 in monthly reoccurring revenue. That's pretty fully baked. In fact, a few years ago, they would have skipped coming to Kurt. They would have just gone on. So you'd be better off to move that needle down further. You'd be better off to develop it more, have working prototypes or definitely screenshots or show usability. Other questions? Way at the back, John.
Yeah, thanks guys for having some really good thoughts tonight. So here's one for you all, right? It seems, I think, from our experience at UDEN, the biggest question we get is, how do we get finance because we can't get finance? So let's just accept that to be fact. How do the filming and gaming communities here increase their chances of getting funding from any of these sources? What would your general points of advice be to increase the chances, assuming that generally we have been successful, and assuming that it's because we're in a hit business, which might make it less attractive? How do we increase our odds?
Let's close with this one, and you have each of the panel respond to that, which is really tips and advice on how to actually get funding. John.
I think I would just go back to my comment about try to find people in your industry, in your area that know and have experience. They don't necessarily have to be in your area. but try to connect with people who have had success and are willing to give you advice, and just sort of try to keep that cadence and try to expand your reach as much as possible to try to get as much information as possible. Because in my experience, doing that, if you really do have a quality product, will help point you in the right direction and will help nudge the ship just the right way to try to get you where you want.
So really learn from someone else that's been there before, Mike.
It doesn't matter how great of an idea you have or how great your product is if you don't have a business plan that makes some sense. And so we have tools and resources internally and with our partners in the community that can really help you refine that business plan and refine that pitch so you're just phenomenal. And that's going to increase your odds regardless of what industry you're in. But it's especially true in this industry because you have to be firing on all cylinders because it is a tougher industry. I don't have all the answers, but I know a lot of people who do. So on your way out, I call this my jumbo business card. Pick it up, shoot me an email. I'll even buy your lunch. Let's sit down. You've heard about us. I'd love to get to know your business a little better, let you know what we can do, and even talk more in depth about some of the resources in the ecosystem that we partner with that could help you out.
Thank you, Mike. Joe, best piece of advice. How would you advise someone to get funded?
Well, you just need to prove traction. And so whether that's you are able to get a prototype out there that a lot of people are excited about and that you can show, hey, we've got 100,000 people that downloaded the demo and this is the feedback that they got for us. You just need to make sure you don't bite off more than you can chew, especially if you're looking at bringing on people that are expensive. You want to do everything at low to no cost up front and get as much traction. Because if you're going to go and try and raise money and you can't show that you can make money and you have to tell a story and they don't know who you are, then that's where it's going to be troubling. So either create traction yourself or bring somebody in that knows these investors so that they can vouch for who you are and what you can do.
Thank you, Joe. Kurt, key piece of advice.
I was going to mention traction, so I'll pick another T, which is team. We have actually done a surprising number of investments in our portfolio, really driven by a fundamental belief in the people that are running the business, more than the inherent attractiveness of the business itself. If it is a team of people that is super compelling based on past experience or expertise, we will sometimes trust, hey, they may not have figured it out yet, but we are pretty sure they will. And so if you're somebody who's fairly new to starting a business or going after the opportunity space you're trying to go after, what I would tell you is there's probably nothing you could do more that would increase your chances of funding, besides traction, than having kind of resumes on your team that people are willing to make a bet on simply because of the quality of the people.
Good. Thank you, Beth.
They've said all the good things. But I would say, really do surround yourself with smart people that have done this before. We've got some entrepreneurs in our incubator who had years and years of experience working for companies like Skullcandy, and they took all of that industrial knowledge, institutional knowledge, and they've now gone off and spun off their own companies. A gentleman just joined the incubator from one of the solar companies, and he's launching his own, solar company on his own. So probably I would guess many of you are working professionals in a company that can teach you a lot, and just rubbing shoulders with, the people that founded those companies, pick their brains, ask them for advice, ask them who they know, and really using that network. I mean, this network alone, I'm sure this is just a group of very well-connected people, and the more people you talk to, you're going to find those that can connect you to someone that might be able to help.
Thank you. John?
I would say start early in trying to, if you need to raise money. My experience is it'll take you probably twice as long that you think to get half as much as you need. And so I would start early and start building your network and start planning.
Thank you to the panel. I think the one thing I would add to that is understand the difference between a project and a business, and pitch the business, not the project. In film, they pitch projects, which basically have a beginning and an end, and the ROI and the investment return is based on that project. A company is essentially set up for that one film, and the company folds at the end of the production of the film. That takes a different mindset from an investor's point of view. This is a business mindset. We like businesses, they outlive projects and products, so I would look at the business. Thank you again to the panel. Thank you for your good questions. Round of applause for them all. They'll be here all week.